I never thought that I'd see a movie that would make me look at the face huggers from Alien and think, maybe that's not so bad. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Horror Movie Syllabus. My name is Professor Victor, and I'll be your host as we go through all the essential, noteworthy, interesting, and notorious modern horror films. If you're new to the channel, I recommend you check out our introduction video. There's a link to it in the description below, and it's going to give you a pretty good sense of what we do here at the Horror Movie Syllabus, which in short is that we look at a particular subgenre of horror, and then we pick 3 movies from that subgenre to explore. But this is our Is It Syllabus-Worthy series. This is where I take a recommendation from you guys, something that you leave in the comments to my videos, a horror movie that I've never seen before. I watch it for the first time, and then I let you know. Is it syllabus-worthy? Is there something about it that makes it worthy of being on the Horror Movie Syllabus? And today, the movie that we're looking at is Almost Human. And Almost Human was recommended to us by Gracie Peanut Pie, friend of the channel, who has made a few recommendations in her day, and they are doing a really good job of finding things that have been good, and in particular, finding movies by Joe Begos, who is the director of Almost Human. And Gracie recommended this in the Bliss Is It Syllabus-Worthy video, which is another Joe Begos film, basically recommending it because it was the same director, and it was one that they had seen before, and I was down for that, because while, if I recall correctly, Bliss did not actually make it syllabus-worthy, I wound up really liking it, and we'll get into that a little bit more as we go on, because I think there's thoughts to be had with regards to Bliss and regards to this movie, which I watched for the first time without knowing pretty much anything about it other than Joe Begos had directed it, and that it was a little bit more kind of like grainy video, kind of nasty kind of movie, like a little lower budget type thing. That's all I really had to go on, and that's all I did. I didn't do any other additional research till after watching it. And I feel like Gracie's trying to make me into a Joe Begos fan, and the question is it working? Well, let's find out. Like I said, the movie that we're looking at today is Almost Human. Almost Human came out in 2013 and was directed by Joe Begos. And we've looked at a couple of his movies before. We looked at Bliss. We looked at Christmas Bloody Christmas. We thought those were both really good movies. So I have high hopes going to this one. And it's interesting because apparently this one is Begos' feature film debut, which could be a really amazing thing, or it could be a bit of a red flag. We're not really sure going into this, but we're going to talk about it in just a second. First, if you haven't seen the movie before, the movie starts with a couple of men being taken in what appears to be a classic alien abduction style scenario. One of the men leaves behind a significant other and a best friend, and they are left to deal with the aftermath of his disappearance and the town's reaction to that. And then a couple years later, he shows back up, and maybe he's back, maybe he's not back, but when he comes back, or whatever it is that it looks like him, the killing starts and the hijinks begin. And we're going to go ahead and stop there so as to not spoil the movie for anybody. And I'm guessing a lot of people haven't seen this movie. It's not exactly one that gets a lot of shine or buzz or whatever, but it is an interesting debut for Joe Begos. As you may recall, or if you've seen the videos I've done about Joe Begos films in the past, he's a very stylish director. He's got a really cool visual aesthetic that I like quite a bit, and he's got a kind of an interesting take on how to tell a story. And this is his feature film debut, and some of that isn't really here, and it's interesting. The thing that's probably that kind of stands out a little bit to me after watching this movie is first time director issues, and both good and bad. And also low budget issues. So, and that's true for all of Begos films. The low budget is always an issue for a Begos film, but that's not something I'm going to hold something against somebody. In fact, I'm usually impressed with the ingenuity of finding a way to make the money work, and that's something that we'll talk about here as well. But the first time director issues are prevalent in this movie, again, for good and for bad. And some of the bad it's got to be addressed up front. And probably the biggest issue is some really shaky acting. Like, there's a lot of speaking roles in this movie, and it feels like not everybody in this movie is actually a professional actor, or at least they're not giving performances that would be indicative of professional actors. They are not great. It's some shaky acting, to say the least. It almost feels like Begos was using friends and family to fill roles. I don't know if that's true or not, but it almost feels like he was not able to afford or get a bunch of real actors, and so he was getting friends and people he knew to fill in these roles, and or wanting to include roles for people who wanted to be in the movie that were friends or whatever, and finding excuses to give them speaking roles that maybe didn't need to be speaking roles, right? The result is that you've got a lot of dialogue, and it's not great dialogue. The dialogue is bland, and the conversations that people get into tend to drag a little bit. And this is a problem, especially in the second act, where the second act drags a little bit. It gets a little repetitive, a little slow, and that's weird because the second act is when things are picking up. The first act is a lot of setup, and the first act has this problem with the acting and with the dialogue, but because there's this mystery that's set up, you're kind of rolling with it, and it isn't until the second act where it starts to wear a little thin. Speaking of thin, the narrative is a little bit thin as well. It's got an interesting premise, an interesting mystery setup, but then as the story goes by or goes on, it's a little thin. There's not a lot of meat on the bone for the story, which in and of itself isn't necessarily a problem if you've got really good characters, really good dialogue, really good actors, really good effects. And Bagos doesn't have all of that to work with, and that's a bit of a challenge. And for a first-time director, he doesn't necessarily overcome these challenges, but he doesn't necessarily fail either. Like I said, that the movie didn't have his normal visual style that I'm accustomed to at this point, but it still looks good. It doesn't look super cheap backyard do it yourself. It still looks professional for the most part. It's still framed well, lit well, and looks decent. It's not an eyesore to look at. He's making the best of the resources he has available to them, and it's fine. There's nothing visually about this movie that put me off or made me unhappy or anything worth digging at. It just didn't have that cool visual flair that I'd gotten accustomed to with the other Begos movies that I'd seen, which was a little bit of a disappointment. But it was, again, not something to criticize, just something that I thought was noteworthy and worth mentioning. Another noteworthy thing about this movie is it is technically a period piece. It is set in the 1980s, even though it's made in 2013, and I'm not sure why. It doesn't seem to add anything to the movie. I don't recall them saying that it was based on true events. Maybe they did. I don't think that was the case. I don't think it was actually based on some alleged true story. I think they just chose to make it in the 80s, and it doesn't seem like it adds anything to it. I guess maybe they wanted to avoid some cell phone aspects, but the setting, the time period, doesn't seem to make any kind of impact. So I'm not quite sure why they chose to do that. But again, it's not a problem. It's just an interesting, noteworthy thing that they said in the 80s. Can't figure out why. Maybe if you know, let me know in the comments. But I couldn't figure it out. But it didn't cause a problem. And that's the thing. I'm seeing these first-time director issues, like choices that are made, or resources that aren't there, or like the actors and whatnot, pacing issues and stuff like that. But none of this is really turning me off. It's not so detrimental to the film that it's ruining my enjoyment. The movie still manages to be mostly compelling and fun, despite some of these first-time director issues that I feel are fairly forgivable. Like I said, the style is not quite there, but it still looks fine. It does start out strong. The opening scene with the abduction is pretty compelling. It's filmed well. It's got a lot of tension, a lot of dire consequences. It feels like it's got energy to it, and then it's setting up this pretty decent mystery of what happened to these guys, one guy in particular, and what has happened to the town as a result, and is it happening again? Interesting stuff that I'm in for. I'm down with this. But what's really interesting to me about this movie is that when it shifts to the return of the kidnapped person, the abducted person, it kind of shifts into more of like a bit of a slasher movie. It's still an alien abduction movie, but there's kills and stuff, and it becomes a little bit of a slasher, and I'm here for that. I love me some slasher movies, and this is a fun one in that it's trying to too. Like there's little homages like that make it clear that they are having slasher influences. There's one scene in particular where somebody's hiding in a closet, and it's straight out of Halloween. It is very much the Halloween scene with Michael Myers and Laurie in the closet, and so they're wearing their influence on their sleeve there. And frankly, it looks pretty good. It's a low budget film, and you can tell it's a low budget film. Very few locations and stuff like that, and it doesn't have a whole lot of money to spend. But the violence in the movie and the gore scenes in the movie are good. The creature effects and stuff like that, they're very minimal, and they don't show a whole lot. They know where their limitations are, and tip your hat to Bagos, knowing what he has to work with and how to work around it. It looks good. There's one scene in particular that looks maybe a little too good, but we'll get to that in a little bit. I'd say that if the movie is a kind of a slasher and also kind of an alien abduction movie, it's kind of like if you had Fire in the Sky or The Fourth Kind with a little bit of Under the Skin and a little bit of like an 80s slasher in there. And I'm down for that. That's a really cool ride. That's a really good vibe for me. I'm down for that. But like I said, there is some pacing issues. The first act is trying to set things up, and it's got the acting issues, that the dialogue issues that it suffers from that. It's a problem. And then the second act, things are picking up, things are starting to happen, but it gets a little monotonous and a little bit repetitive, and that's it's dragging a little bit in the second half. But the third act takes off. The third act is where it really at. And I was looking back at my Bliss video, and I said the same thing about Bliss too. The first two acts were a little bit of a slog and had some character issues and stuff like that, and then it really kicked in the third act. And the same thing is here. And I think that's maybe a Bagos trait, although I don't remember that being the case so much with Christmas Bloody Christmas. But for Bliss, it was definitely the case, and for here, it's definitely the case. The third act, so good that it makes you forgive the first two acts, because the third act, you're having such a good time and you're so locked in, and he's really showing off what he can do, that you almost like you're forgiving any of the shortcomings because of what was happening in the third act. In that third act is where Bagos really can make his effects show off a bit, shows where he put his money into it, and really kind of just lean into the slasher aspect of this movie, which I think is the strongest part of it. Like, there's the sci-fi aspect of it that is kind of a little bit rote. You've seen it better in Fire in the Sky or Fourth Kind, stuff like that. You've seen it done better, but it's familiar and it's fine. It's perfectly serviceable. But then when you fold the slasher aspects into the kills in particular, that's where this movie really starts to stand out, and it really shines in that third act. In particular, there's a scene, and it's a sexual assault scene, right? The guy comes back and he's attacking his significant other, and it's like he's trying to possess her or infect her or whatever in a way that is very much a sexual assault, and it is incredibly disturbing, very creative, and also somewhat comical all at the same time. Now, let me be clear. They play it straight. They don't play it for laughs. But the idea of these tentacle like attaching in her genitals is disturbing, to say the least. And it's shot so well that you see just enough to get the horror of it, but not so much that you can see the gimmick of it. And they do a really good job of making it super unsettling. But also, just I've never seen anything like that before. Like, I've seen, Species where they have, sex, and then the woman starts turning into an alien and stuff like that. But I've never seen anything like this before. Maybe other movies have done it, but to me, this felt very fresh and original, and it blew my mind. And there are other ways that they do gory scenes and infection scenes and stuff like that, but it really, that scene alone was super noteworthy to me. And then just the whole third act and all the violence and all of the alien stuff going on was really working for me. It was really firing on all cylinders. And it's interesting because, again, narratively, pretty thin, right? Like, you're not going to get a whole lot of answers as to what's going on. You can get the idea of alien invasion, and that's basically all you need to know. But answers are in short supply in this movie. Like, starts out with two victims, and we only follow one of them coming back. We have no idea what happened to the victim. The movie just kind of forgets that there was another victim. And you know what? It kind of doesn't matter. Like, the narrative being thin, and again, the acting being a little shaky, at least the dialogue aspects of it, is a problem. It is. But the fun kills and the violence and the gore and the special effects of it are usually enough for me in a slasher film, and they are working very, very well here. But are they enough for me here to make it syllabus worthy? Well, let's find out. So, is Almost Human syllabus worthy? Nope. Nope, it's not. Bagos, yet again, misses the mark, just barely, really. Like his other movies, I enjoyed this one very, very much. I had a really good time with it because again, it left me with a good feeling at the end of it. But the first two acts are a bit of problem, and that makes it fall a little bit short. Uh, Side note, I might have to reevaluate Bliss because I said Bliss wasn't syllabus worthy, but I'll be honest with you, that movie stuck with me after watching it. I still think about that movie now. I really, really like that movie, and I kind of, if I were to go back and reevaluate it now, I might squeak it over the line and give it syllabus worthy status because that one still remains my favorite of the Bagos movies that I've seen. I really, really like that. Things that I was a little hard on when I watched that movie, I'm softer towards now, and I see the benefits or the good things of that movie kind of outweigh the negative things about it as time has gone on and I've thought about it more. So I'm softer, I'm a little bit more open to that movie. And maybe the same thing would happen here too, because like I said, there's a lot of first time director nitpicks to have about this movie, issues that it is a challenge, but it uses its money well. It's showing some of Bagos's directorial skill, and it's showing some really cool slasher kill stuff that really won me over at the end. It's just not enough to push itself onto the syllabus, right? It's not going to push out other things. It's not going to push out anything of the alien subgenre or the sci-fi horror subgenre. Definitely not in the slasher subgenre. Like it's not going to be strong enough to push its way through those and get itself onto the syllabus. But it is still a really good movie. Now, it doesn't really. I said this before. It doesn't really have any buzz. It doesn't seem like it really made a huge impact. And I do kind of take that into consideration too. If it was something that's a little more noteworthy, reputation-wise, maybe it would have to force its way on. But it doesn't really do that either. But none of that really matters. The fact that it's not even syllabus worthy doesn't really matter because it's a good movie. It's a fun movie. That third act, again, it maybe takes a little while to get to the where you want to be, but when it gets there, it delivers. It delivers really good. Had I seen this movie first, I would have been very interested in seeing what Bagos does next. I've seen what Bagos does next now, and I think he's very, very good. I'm going to be down for the next Bagos movie that comes out. I kind of made the comment before. Is Gracie turning me into a Bagos fan? Yes. Yes, I'm a Bagos fan now. That is for sure it. I'm down for whatever he does next. I like what he does very well. Just because it didn't make it on the syllabus doesn't mean it's not really good, and it doesn't mean it's worth your time, not worth your time, because it totally is. So that's my thoughts on Almost Human. Let me know if you guys have seen it before, Gracie. Let me know your thoughts are on it. I know you talked about it a little bit in your comment when you suggested it, but let me know if you guys have seen this movie, what you think of it. Let me know about that sexual assault scene and how you feel about it, because I gotta believe that it's a controversial scene. I gotta believe, and I'd just be curious to see what people's thoughts are on this one. I think this one really good. I really enjoyed this one quite a bit, even with its flaws, and I'm wondering if you guys feel the same way. Now, I feel it's time to do a horror trivia pursuit card because it's that time where I'm going to read a card right here on camera, try to answer it live, and hopefully not embarrass myself. So we were talking about an alien movie, so we're going to look at the monster category on the card. And here's the question. 2007's 30 Days of Night was based on the graphic novel of the same name by what author? I actually know this one. I actually know this one, and it's kind of funny how I know this one because I went to school with a guy who has the same name. And when 30 Days a Night came out, I wasn't 100% sure that it wasn't this guy. We weren't super close friends or anything like that, just more like acquaintances. And I hadn't really kept up with him. And I had to do a quick look and see, is this the same guy I went to school with? It's not. It's not. But that's why the name sticks out in my memory and why I remember it when I wouldn't necessarily remember this so well. Now, we have talked about 30 Days of Night on the channel. It's a vampire movie. I love that movie. I think it's excellent. Josh Hartnett in it. Melissa George is in it. It's done really well. Horrific, scary vampires, which I'm a fan of. I like the movie. If you haven't seen it, it's a high recommend. I definitely think you should check it out. I think it's an underrated vampire movie, and I think I talked about that probably on the video as well. I don't know, it's been a while since I looked at it, but 30 Days of Night, great movie. Great book. I've read the graphic novel. I think it's wonderful. I think the art's fantastic. I think that the story is good. And this person wrote the book. So I've brought it on a little bit to give you some time to think about it. This is going to be one of those ones where you either kind of know it or you don't. I guess you could take a guess, but I don't think there's any deductive reasoning or anything like that. It's not even really good ways to give you clues unless you know every single person I went to school with, I guess. I don't know. Like this person, as far as I know, this is the only thing that they're famous for, but I could be wrong on that. And if I am, let me know in the comments. But that's it. I'm going to go ahead and wrap up your thought process, get your answer locked in. I'm going to go ahead and answer. Locked in. Cool. Okay, so my answer is Steve Niles. Steve Niles wrote the graphic novel 30 Days of Night. Let's check the card. Stephen Niles with a V. Stephen Niles with a V. So yeah, that is the person I went to school with, but it's not the person I went to school with, just the same name. And that's why I remember that. But it's a really good book. You should check it out if you haven't. It's a great movie. You should check that out if you haven't. And I'm glad you checked out this video. Thank you very much for hanging out till the end. Thank you very much for recommendations, especially Gracie. Thank you for this one. It was great. I really enjoyed it. And keep the recommendations coming. I'm having a good time checking out what you guys recommend, because generally, even if you don't make it syllabus worthy, you make it good. You make it worth my time. Very rare that I'm unhappy that I spent the time watching movies that you guys recommend. So keep them coming. For now, we're going to wrap it up this week. Next week, we'll be doing something a little bit different. But until then, I'm just going to say, class dismissed.